Hey friend, welcome back to Better Days Start Today. I'm Adrienne, and you are in for such a treat today. I'm talking with Lori Pappas, a woman who has lived multiple, bold, beautiful, unconventional lives. From being one of the first women in the US to sell computers, to starting her own software company, to moving to Africa alone in her 50s, to lead humanitarian projects, Lori is the definition of a woman who reinvents without apology. This episode is a celebration of life pivots, of staying open to what's next, and of refusing to believe you're ever done becoming. Lori's stories are filled with courage, curiosity, and an incredible willingness to say yes to what calls her, even when it looks wildly different than what came before. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Adrian. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So I'm super excited about hearing your story and hearing about the book. I feel like you're somebody that has lived many lives in this lifetime. And I love that because I know there's so much that my listeners can gain from hearing your story and some of the things that you've gone through. In case they're not familiar with you yet, could you tell us a little bit about your story, your journey, and what's led you to where you are today?
Sure. So, I started out in a rather dysfunctional home in that my mother was a religious fanatic, and my father just wanted peace in the family. And I went through some trauma, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And I realized at 17 that if I was going to really be me, if I was going to have any kind of life that I would enjoy, I had to take control of it. And so that's when I really just set out on my own, and we'll circle back to that as well. And I ended up becoming an entrepreneur, starting a software company that sold to manufacturers, which was very unusual. This would have been in the 1970s, and at that time that was very, very male dominated. And I had already become one of the first women in the United States to sell computers. So that's really my first career, is the entrepreneurial piece. Then I sold that business when I was 49 and tried to retire. And being an overachiever, I tried really hard to retire. I planted 3,000 plants in my garden and tried to play golf, which was a total disaster, and did volunteer work. And I so much wanted to just be a follower at that time. And I found out that I failed that too, is that I'm just not a very good follower. I always kind of want to do things my way. But it did allow me, some traumatic events happened, and I finally started working on inner child work and embraced that with vigor. Then I had an epiphany and became a humanitarian and moved to Africa and lived there for 8, 9 years by myself. And we implemented a lot of different programs for a lot of people. I mean, I'm talking about water, sanitation, hygiene, adult schools, orphanage, female reproductive health, environmental problem issues, income generating. I mean, like I said, I'm an overachiever. And then I had another epiphany, and and here I am on my third career. So that's the broad brush view of the life of Lori Pappas in this century.
I love that you said you tried to retire and then just like threw
I kept
yourself
failing.
into that's but that's amazing though, like the different path you ended up going down, thinking, maybe as far as achievement or career wise, like, oh, this is it. And then it's like you've had several since.
Right. And I always did it with great vigor because whatever I believe at the moment, I really believe. And then when new information comes in and I think, oh, maybe I should pivot to the right or to the left, I pivot and then I'm off with great vigor that way. So, yeah, I'm not real tied into what my path is today because who knows what the opportunities will be tomorrow.
I love that. I'm very much the same way. You can think you know what's available or what's next, but really, like you said, you don't know what's going to come tomorrow. And there could be something beyond your wildest imagination that you never could have planned or conceived. And you got to be open to it. That's where the magic is.
It is, absolutely.
You said that you went through a difficult past, traumatic upbringing,
Hmm.
and you had like an epiphany, a moment of clarity where you knew you had to take control if you wanted something different.
Hmm.
Could you talk about that first moment of clarity and how it shaped your life?
Sure. Well, like I said, my mother was a religious fanatic and she wanted me to be good, which meant that I needed to comply and say yes and do the right things and think that whatever she said was perfect. Well, I didn't feel that. And I was rebellious. Every time I walked into the house, she would have be listening to some preaching on the radio. So I'd immediately turn off the radio and I sassed a bit. And one day, when I was probably like 13 years old, I'd had a girlfriend stay overnight and I had gone into the bathroom to start getting ready for the day. And all of a sudden, my mother barged in, shut the door, locked it, and started telling me how I couldn't do anything that day except clean out the cupboards because my aunt was coming and she wanted my aunt to think that she was a good housekeeper. So I said, well, there you go. If you want to be thought of as a good housekeeper, be a good housekeeper. Have fun cleaning out the cupboards. Why should I clean out your cupboards so she thinks you're a good housekeeper? Well, my mother went off and she was convinced that I was possessed by the devil because nobody could have because her child could not be so evil as what I was to say something like that. So she got in my face and started yelling at me. You are the devil. I command you. What is your name? You need to get out of my daughter. What is your name? And I kept looking at her saying, wow, you are a weird lady. And finally, I escaped. My friend and I left for the day. But when I came back, she had other plans for me. She put me in the car and drove me to her favorite pastor, who then joined her in trying to exorcise the devil in me. And they went on for hours about what was my name. They commanded the devil to get out of me, and so on and so forth. And during that time, I remember thinking, well, they are just strange. But I didn't realize what kind of psychological abuse that really was happening to me at the time. And that ended up with me hyperventilating and disassociating. And but it didn't stop me from talking back. So my father, in effort to have peace in the house, hauled us off to a psychologist who made the determination that my mother really needed help, but because my father refused for her to get help, that I then was put into a mental institute. Now, back in the 1960s, this is the day of shock treatment, lobotomies. I mean, if any of you remember watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson, I mean, that's the picture that that type of thing was. And here I was, 16 years old, and they started giving me all these drugs. And one day, this girl from the room next door came into my room and she was crying and she had just had shock treatment. And now she learned that she was scheduled for a lobotomy. And even at 16, I knew that was not a good thing. And that was my moment of clarity. It was, I had to figure out how to get out of that place with no more damage done to me. And I refused to swallow the pills. They didn't know that I was not swallowing them, but I figured out how I could pretend to swallow and not actually swallow. And 2 months later, I managed to get out of there. And the only thing I lost was my photographic memory, which I had when I went in. But that's okay because, synapses happen in your brain and you are able to piece things back together again. But I knew I turned 17 and I kind of slid by that part of it and so here I was 17 years old. I got on a train, traveled across country. I realized at that moment that I could not count on anybody but myself to get me anywhere in life. So that was my moment of clarity, and that really shaped my life.
That's incredible. Incredible that you went through it and survived it and have gone on to do everything that you've done. And being on your own like that, you said you felt like you couldn't really rely on anybody else, depend on anybody else. And I would imagine that has stuck with you a bit.
Oh, definitely, because what it does is that I develop very, very tough skin. We call it lizard skin. I mean, and that's why I was able to compete successfully in a very male dominated macho world at the time. Because whenever arrows or innuendos were thrown at my way, it just kind of fell off. I was protected. But
Mhm.
what that meant was I also was not allowing myself to feel. And that then led to another major event in my life, and that was stepping out of my comfort zone and forgiving myself for what I came to realize being a subpar mom. And that was very difficult to forgive myself because I'd had a lousy mother and I wanted to be this fabulous mother. And so, of course, I was trying to overachieve, but I didn't realize that my lizard skin was keeping me from accessing my own superpower and the wisdom inside of me. So I had to shed that lizard skin or allow it to be peeled back so then I could feel and I could start accessing the real me. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm wondering, stepping out of your comfort zone with that, allowing yourself to feel and kind of peeling back the lizard skin, it seems like though that was a turning point for you realizing you're stepping out of your comfort zone, it seems like you've been out of your comfort zone a lot.
Well, I have been because I really get bored, you
Hmm.
know? I mean, if you're just going to stay in the same spot all the time, you stagnate. I mean, and that gets boring, doesn't it? I mean, if you do the same thing day after day, whether it be traveling the world or running on some other kind of spinning wheel like a gerbil, whenever we do the same thing, we stagnate. And we need to have a stimulus come in that shakes us up a little bit. And then it becomes
Absolutely.
exciting because then we have new things to explore.
Hmm. What I'm hearing and what I read in your book is it's not about waiting for that to happen for you. It's about creating it when you feel that curiosity or that restlessness to, shake it up for yourself if you have to.
Yeah, I really think it is, for one thing, we need to pause in order for us to even see the different options available. If we're just running in one direction, it's a blur. So we need to pause. So then we're able to look around and see what those different pathways may be, or what those different options are, or what new information we could take a look at, and then think about it. Take the time to reflect about it, and then it becomes pretty clear. And this, like anything else, takes a bit of practice. You're not real good at it the very first time you try. But the more you try and the more you practice, the more mistakes you made, the better you become.
You mentioned kind of when stepping out of the comfort zone. I just want to circle back to that really quick, just because you were
Hmm.
talking about forgiving yourself. And
Hmm.
I would imagine there was some stories about the way you're supposed to be as a mom or as a woman in the world working in a male dominated industry. And just kind of, I think women feel very plagued by the supposed to's, whether they realize it or not, because they're so ingrained.
Right, they are. Let me tell you a fun one because
Okay.
it just happened about a year and a half ago. My husband and I decided to move to Northern California in on the spur of the moment. Now, the timing wasn't perfect because I was scheduled to get another knee replacement but we did it anyway. So we had decided, and within 3 weeks, our house was up for sale. And I had flown back to Minnesota to go to the Mayo Clinic and get my knee replaced. And my granddaughter flew out from Florida to drive us up to Northern California to look for a house. So I was in the car 5 days after I got that knee replaced. Now, my husband is disabled. So he uses either a walker or a mobility scooter to get around. And the Airbnb we landed in was really not a good place for us. It had a slanted floor.
Oh
So
gosh.
Bill had a really hard time walking. I had a hard time wobbling. And my granddaughter had to go back to work. So my kids, my two daughters, would call and say, Mom, can we come out and help you? Now, the supposed to answer is yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
To let your kids
Yep.
help.
They're offering it.
And being a mom, you should say yes. That's the supposed to. And I thought about it for a minute and I said, well, you can't cook, you don't clean, you eat different food than Bill and I do. No, you can't come out. I mean, how is that going to make my life easier? It's just going to be another burden, right?
Mhm.
And so I said no. And
That's funny. I'm sure
it
she was not
worked.
expecting that answer either.
No, no. But when you really stop and you think about something and you're faced with that supposed to, think a little bit about how is that going to benefit you or the situation? Because at the end of the game, you can't make somebody else happy. You really can't. People are only happy when they think they're happy. And that's a personal choice. So you saying yes to a supposed to isn't improving your quality of life. It really doesn't make another person happy unless they're a control freak. And who wants to feed a control freak? That's not a real fun thing to do.
And I feel
So
like for myself too, with the supposed to's, when you're saying yes, when it's a supposed to and it's not in alignment. And then there, as much as you don't want it, like that little bit of resentment is kind of under the
it just
surface.
it
It's
just
there.
grows. It
Hmm.
grows. It definitely grows. So it's really not healthy for anybody. You saying yes to a supposed to that you don't want, and when I talk about supposed to's, I think of a supposed to as a suit that is slipped over you when you're first born. It's the supposed to of your family. It's the supposed to defined by your culture, by your society. And you really didn't have a choice about it. But as you grow and gain knowledge, you have the ability to look at these supposed tos and say, oh, I like that. Yes, that feels good for me. That's part of who I am. But you also have the right to say, no, I don't want that. That's a bunch of garbage. Kind of like
Hmm.
my kids coming out to help me. I mean, no, you're not going to be a help. Wait until I'm really solid and I can move around and have my own house again. And then I'd love to have you come visit and I can show you a good time. But I can't handle another burden right now.
I think that's amazing that you could say that out loud. Something I've learned as I'm getting older is that when I was younger, I would trade the easy yes for comfort in the moment at the expense of long term discomfort because I said yes to something I didn't want. And as I'm
So
getting
well
older,
said.
yes, I'm realizing I would rather that moment of discomfort up front for long term feeling better about myself in the situation.
It's so good, Adrian. I mean, that's such a wise decision. It really, really is. Good on you. That's fabulous.
Thank you. Your book is called The Magic of Yes. And
Mhm.
I would love to hear the origin story of The Magic of Yes and what made you decide to start a new career at 75?
Uh, yeah, really.
No small
To my
question. It's fine.
So if we dial back to me failing retirement, one of the things that I was doing during that time was traveling a lot. And I was in the middle of the Sahara Desert because isn't that where everybody goes? And and the group I was with had gone off ahead to look at some site, and I noticed some kids, and so I hung back, and a little girl came up to me, and she was very skinny and barely had any clothes covering her, and she was carrying a sibling that was about the same size as she was. And what she really wanted was my water bottle. Because if you own a water bottle, you have a chance to live. And that's the number one thing that these little kids want is just a water bottle. And of course, I gave her my water bottle. But as I was looking at her, I noticed she had flies on her eyes. And all of a sudden, I had another moment of clarity in that, oh my God, that could be my precious little Ella, my granddaughter I was talking about. And that time she was about 6 years old. And I realized this little girl did nothing wrong to be born into a disease ridden life. And Ella did nothing right to be born my granddaughter. It was just what happened. I became, all of a sudden, I had another purpose. And now my purpose was to try to get flies off of these kids' lives. So one thing led to another, and soon I found myself living in Ethiopia by myself in a house, rented house that really didn't have any insulation at all, and gaps in the windows, gaps in the doors, and the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, is a 1.5 miles high. So even though it gets hot during the day, it gets very cold at night. And by this time, I had hired a bunch of people, not knowing really what I was doing. And it was really, that's a whole nother story. I was working down in the extreme southwest corner of Ethiopia, of course, with the most marginalized people, because why would I do the easier things? And doing
Overachiever.
all, I know that overachiever thing kept coming up. And during the day, it would be exhausting. I mean, the government was harassing me because I was working in a very difficult area. Communication problems were difficult with the employees and the noise. I mean, you had constant noise with the Muslim call to prayer, with the Ethiopian Orthodox preaching over the big loudspeakers, with the town crier crying, and the donkeys braying, and the chickens, and just all this noise. And so finally at night, I would get home into my little house, leaky little house, put on all the clothes I owned, and then there'd be no electricity. So I would light my 3 candles, and it was too dark to read, and I was forced to sit and think. And that was the first time, I have to say, that I truly would get off the gerbil syndrome of running on that spinning wheel, because I had no options. I was exhausted. I was cold. It was dark. I had the light of the candles. I could only think until I got tired enough to go to sleep. And during that thinking, I started asking myself, what if? What if I stopped the doing and I started focusing on what it meant to be? What would it, and it started out, what would it be like if I was one of these marginalized women? What would it be if I was one of these employees that really had a lot of fear governing their actions because of governmental restraints? What if I was that person that was just dependent on that donkey braying, driving me nuts, but that donkey was my livelihood? What if? And in thinking about those what ifs, it really encouraged me to start thinking about who I am and what I have learned. And I became very compelled to share my story. But I didn't want to make it just be a monologue about my life. I mean, I thought, well, who wants to read that? But I wanted it to be something that was relatable to the reader. The more I thought about it, the more I became convinced I needed to say Yes. And to do that, even though once again it was out of my comfort zone, because I never looked at myself as a writer. And one thing happened after another, and I had to leave Ethiopia. The main thing was it became too dangerous for me to stay there as a single woman, and that it was unfair to the embassy because I really became a hostage target, and it was not fair to the whole system that people should have to worry about my safety, that I didn't have to be there. And it also, it was too dangerous for my employees to be working at that time. So I ended up being forced to shut it down. And by that time, I had met the love of my life online, and he lived in Mexico. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll go live in Mexico. But it took 7 years of his nurturing and care for me to get the energy to be able to take on this next adventure. And during the writing of the book, I kept thinking about how can I make these lessons and these opportunities and these pathways I'm encouraging people to explore more accessible. And then that led me to including stories of other extraordinary, ordinary women. And then I still wasn't satisfied because I'm an overachiever. And I wanted to make sure that every chapter was worth the reader's time, and that at the end of the chapter that they had an actionable plan that would help them be able to accomplish their goal. And that's what led me to the dream framework. And that really is, and what that is, it's an acronym for desire, reflect, explore, achieve, and a mantra.
First of all, the story about Ethiopia, going there alone, being in that dangerous situation, still knowing there's work to be done. And one thing you said, that when you saw the little girl, I had a new purpose. One of the things that I think women especially struggle with is thinking there needs to be a singular capital P purpose of their life, where you can find yourself at different phases of your life in different situations and have purpose in that, where you are in
Mm-hmm.
that moment. And that realizing I have another purpose, that's just a brilliant realization, and it's allowing yourself to explore that too.
It is. And I mean, I've had a lot of purposes. I mean, I've had, you think about it, you have little purposes, you have big purposes, you've got purposes for this, purpose for that. Why can't you have multiple purposes for your life?
Mm-hmm.
And it all depends upon where you are in your journey at the time. You know, my purpose when I was 17 was to survive. My purpose when I was in my 30s and 40s was to help my customers make more money and for them to have a life. That was my purpose, and to develop the potential of my employees. Then my purpose in my 50s and 60s was to help these really marginalized people have a chance to have a healthy life. And now in my 70s, my purpose is to help other women find inner peace and a sense of harmony in their life. My purpose changes. And who knows what my purpose will be in my 80s and 90s. I mean, I'm only 75, so I'm going to live to 127. So I've got a long time left and some more purposes out there.
I was going to say, you have a few more lifetimes to live in
I
that time
do, I
for sure.
do, I do.
Your book is so powerful, and the dream framework, talking about winning with the cards I've been dealt. And could you
Right.
walk us through the dream framework a little bit? Like when you say
Sure.
desire, reflect, like what are you talking about in that, just so they can get an understanding of how that could work in their life?
Okay. I write a newsletter and I just wrote it. My last issue was I feel powerless. What can I do? And so we talk about that. And then at the end, I felt led to do a dream framework. So let me just share that particular one as
Okay.
far as I feel powerless. What can I do? And so if you think about that, what is the real desire there? If I feel powerless, what can I do? I would guess that probably the desire is something like I want to feel comfort and safe. If I feel powerless, that means I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm not feeling safe and all that. And I want safety. I want to be happy. I want to feel comfort. So then what can I think about? Well, one of the things I think is really important to think about is happiness means not contributing to make things worse. Happiness is finding some place where I can drop my emotional baggage and think about all the information I know, what I've gathered from learning, from experiences or whatever. So I think of reflect as information less the emotional baggage. If you can drop your emotional baggage, then you're able to look at really what you know without the noise. So then we think about explore. Well, if we think about explore, then we can think about we really have to pay attention. We might have a genetic response to situations, but we can train ourselves to react differently. There are things that we can do. So even in a time of chaos or uncertainty, that we can feel safe ourselves. But we need to do that with intention and explore ways in which we can find that peace and that harmony. Now, I find the acknowledge really interesting because I think of it as acknowledge that as I try this new behavior, I'm going to make mistakes. It's not going to work. I'm not going to know what I'm doing wrong. How come Lori said this would happen and it's not happening? Why not? It's a bunch of bullshit. No, think about you have to make little mistakes in order to learn, in order to build that muscle. So become a really good mistake maker. That's what I am. I'm really good at making lots of little mistakes really fast. And I learn from them because I take the time to think about it. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that you're not going to get an A plus the first time out. And it might feel like failure, but keep trying. And then I love including a mantra. I think it's really important to have something to soothe the soul while we're trying something new. And so, like for this one, because it was, I feel powerless, what can I do? The mantra that I was encouraging my readers to do was to say, I can choose what I read. I can choose what fills my mind. I can choose who I greet. I am the master of me. Because every single one of us have an innate ability to choose. And you don't have to read something that makes you upset. You don't have to listen to something that you find yuck, You just don't have to listen to yucky stuff. And you really don't have to surround yourself with people you don't like or that make you feel uncomfortable. You want your environment to nurture you. Now, some of us are caught in tough relationships or in situations that we feel really stuck, but we can find little ways to unstick ourselves if we have that intention. If we make the choice to not fall into the victimhood, if we make the choice, I am going to be the master of me, we're smart and we have wisdom inside of ourselves. We just need to listen to ourselves and trust ourselves. And it's okay to be afraid. But what's important is naming that fear and then stepping beyond it. So it's doable, not necessarily easy, but very worth it.
I feel like that dream framework, if you're grappling with any problem, you can take it to the framework and go through it. And the permission to explore, I love that because I feel like so often we feel like we need to have it figured out. Like you said, you have to get that A plus the first time out the gate, but that's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. So when you give yourself that space to explore and then really reflect on what's going on, and failure is feedback. Any mistake that you make, really, it's just information for you to then move forward with. And I feel like if
Right.
you work this framework with a problem, the opportunities will really open up, things that you may not see when you're just kind of ruminating on it. But if you take it and you work that framework, it's going to really open up your eyes to what's available.
Right. Right. And on the acknowledgement part, it's good to acknowledge that, oh, well, I'm really scared of this person and I've got to get out from underneath his control, but I'm really scared. It's really good to name that fear because as soon as you name it, you're already on it. You're already on working a solution because we all have that wisdom inside of us. We can do that. And remember, it's good to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Asking for help is really, and it's available. And I give everybody permission. If you're in a situation like that and you just feel like you're so alone, just reach out your hand and say, Adrian, help me. Lori, help me. And even though we're not there and we're not talking to you or you're not listening to our voice, you can hear that voice in your head saying, I'm here. I'll help you. Just hold my hand. So we are a sisterhood. We are available. And we really want everybody to find that inner peace.
And I feel like sometimes as women, we get so used to taking care of everything for everybody else, we forget to ask for help when we need it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about, you're a gift to others when you help them, there's an allowing there. When you allow people to help you, you're giving them that same opportunity, that same gift to show up for you in the way that you would for others.
Right, right. Just remember, you don't have to do the supposed to, though. If they can't cook and clean
Yeah.
and eat the same food, you don't have to say yes.
Absolutely. So saying yes is very powerful. What does saying yes actually mean to you? And how can it look different from people pleasing versus when it comes to wisdom? Because, like you said, like you don't want to get wrapped up in those supposed to's. How do you
You
discern
know,
that?
what saying yes means to me is saying yes to being open minded, to being willing to reflect on something and to apply the dream framework to it. You know, is this what is my desire if I say yes? What is the goal of my saying yes? And what should I really think about before I say yes? What do I need to really acknowledge? If I am I afraid to say yes, and why am I afraid? Or what would be holding me back? Or what do I think I'm inadequate? If I said yes, what is there? And then to say something that, think of something that, well, I am the master of me. I am the master of me. And just by repeating some of that can help soothe you. So saying yes is saying yes to looking at it, to considering it, to seeing if that works and how does that benefit. And remember, you're really important. You are important. You are a treasure. And you have as much rights as an innate human being as anybody else has. So you don't have to suffer so someone else can get A, B, C, whatever it is. You're important. Your being is important.
That's really beautiful. And I love that you're not saying yes means you have it all figured out. Saying yes is being open, and that is really powerful. And I think if women can remember that, saying yes doesn't mean you have to know the outcome or think you're going to or know everything going in. It's saying yes to possibility, really.
It is. It's saying yes to possibility and that you'll think about it actively.
Yes.
Yes.
I absolutely love your book. And I know this is one that I'm going to be revisiting again and again for anybody listening. It is The Magic of Yes, Embrace the Wise Women Within. And that came out, I believe, it was February 7th. So it should be available everywhere that you can buy books. And I
Right.
definitely recommend picking that up. Like I said, it's a really engaging read, and the stories, even the way you tell your, it's not a preachy self-help book, which I love. Like it's very much, it takes you on a journey. And
Oh,
I love
good.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's so much what I wanted. I mean, God, I heard enough preaching when I was a kid. There was no way I wanted to be preaching.
I love that. It's just kind of walking through some of the stories and that awakening or that finding the wisdom, the decision making. It's for me, as I was reading it, how you worked through different things got me thinking about my own stuff. And it's not like a you have to do this. It's as you're going through the stories, you could see what's possible. And like I said, the dream framework I think is really beautiful and really powerful.
Good. Thank my dog Mooney for that because when I'm walking her, that's when I get those moments of, oh, all right, that'll work.
If you could share like one thing that you wish everybody could take from this, what is one thing that you'd like them to know?
I would say the one thing that I want everybody to know is that you have wisdom inside you. We all share the same DNA. And I know that I've got wisdom and I'm wise. I know Adrian has wisdom and she's wise, and you share our DNA. So there you go. I mean, there's no, oh, not me. There's none of that. We all share the same DNA and we all have that wisdom. It's just a matter of practice to learn how to access that wisdom. And there are all kinds of tools, and certainly not just from me, there are from a lot of people. I know for myself, I have a newsletter, Sticky Thoughts, and the book, and you can find everything that I've got just on the website, which is my name, Lori Pappas. But there is one favor I'd really like to ask of your listeners, if I may,
Of
and that
course.
is, would you please leave a review for Adrian on her podcast? And in that review, would you please share some gem, something that resonated? Hopefully something resonated, but and and if it did, tell us that too. But something that some gem that you think, oh, this is one little thing that I could do. It's one little thing that I could do differently that might help me. And that would be so helpful to both of us because we're really doing this to help you. It's really not an ego driven thing. It's something that we really want to share what we know and what we've learned to have be true. So please leave a review, and in that, include some gem that you got out of the show, and we'd be so grateful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for saying that too, because also us talking, like we're on a screen and of course it goes out to everybody, but when you leave the review or contact on social media, anything like that, it's inviting that two-way conversation. So it's not like we're just
Mhm.
talking into the ether.
Exactly, exactly. It gives us a chance to get some feedback, and we need feedback.
We absolutely do. I appreciate you taking the time and being here. Like I said, I was so excited to talk to you and read your book. It's absolutely amazing. I'm going to put the information for your book and ways to work with you in the show notes and on my website. So anybody that listens, they know where to get that. And so that way they can find themselves in your world as well.
That'd be great. I'd love it.
All right. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Just the fact that you are so special, every one of you listeners, you're listening for a reason. There's something that caused you to tune in to this episode. And we're so grateful you did. And we just sincerely wish you joy and happiness in your journey.
Thank you so much for being here.
I told you Lori was something special. This episode is such a reminder that it's never too late to begin again, to try something unexpected, or to follow the whisper of a new chapter, even when it doesn't make sense yet. If Lori's story inspired you, share this episode with a friend who needs to be reminded of what's possible. If you've been feeling stuck in your head and you're craving clarity, or you just need a change, you want to shake things up, like Lori was talking about, I want to invite you to a workshop I created just for this moment. It's called Clarity Without Overthinking, and in just 90 minutes, I'll guide you through a powerful process to reconnect with your own voice, using AI as a thinking partner. This isn't techy or overwhelming. It's designed to help you hear yourself again and take one aligned step forward. Head to adriancrowley.com/workshops to save your seat. I promise this will be so powerful and you do not want to miss this. Until next time, remember, your better days, they start today. Thanks so much for spending time with me on Better Days Start Today. If you loved this episode, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review. It helps more people find this space and start creating their better days too. And hey, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter at adriancrowley.com. You'll get exclusive tips, tools, and access to complimentary events designed to support you every step of the way. Until next time, remember, your better days, they start today.